The Pirates' catching position may be in a good place. We just didn't expect it to be in the way that it happened.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith. You can find me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. I've been hosting this show for 4 years now, as of a couple weeks ago, bringing you your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans just like you. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates this afternoon/evening is brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com right now for all of your betting needs, because you got playoff baseball, the NFL, college football, basketball is right around the corner, hockey is here, so you have all of your betting needs all in one place at America's #1 sports book. We are still in the middle of the 2024 player review series. It's been fun so far. We handed out some awards. We've talked about starting pitching. We've talked about the bullpen. And now we're making our way into the field now, where we're going to start talking about the position groups of this team and where they sit. And one of the more intriguing groups that the Pirates currently have is the catcher position, for a lot of different reasons. You look at this Pirates team going into this year, and if you guys don't remember, right before the season started, I had Michael McHenry, former Pirates catcher, on the show to discuss what kind of jump we would see from a guy like Henry Davis. We'll talk about Davis a lot more later on the show. And that was kind of the centerpiece, is they bring in Yasmani Grandal to be a veteran presence. You still had Jason DeLay, and then Henry Davis was supposed to be the centerpiece, with Endy Rodriguez out with injury, or on Endy later as well. Henry starts the year, and it didn't start great by any means, like whatsoever. You look at what he was able to do in pretty much the time that he had before he was sent down. In April, folks, he had a 170 average. It's just not going to cut it. And the big conundrum we were all having with a guy like Henry Davis right away was, okay, where's the defense going to be at? What kind of player is he going to be defensively? Because that's why he played right field in 2023, because the Pirates did not think he was adequate enough defensively to play the position just yet. The bat becomes an issue. Then all of a sudden, here comes Joey Bart. Joey Barrels. I don't mean to alarm you. All the Joey Bart memes that we got. He comes in on April 6th against the Baltimore Orioles off of waivers from the San Francisco Giants. Now, bearing in mind when we talk about Joey Bart and what kind of player he is, you're looking at a guy a lot like Henry Davis, who was a top catching selection in the MLB draft, was supposed to be the direct heir to what Buster Posey was doing. Shout out to Buster Posey, by the way, for getting into baseball ops post-career. And Joey Bart flames out kind of in San Francisco. I mean, you look at what he did in San Francisco before his arrival in Pittsburgh. 33 games in the COVID year, not a lot of time in 2021, not even really a lot of time in 2023, and he just wasn't really hitting the ball all that much. Even Joey Bart in 2022, which is the most games that he's played in a season, which I believe was 97, his OPS was a 660. He wasn't hitting the ball all that great at any point in being a San Francisco Giant. So he makes his way to Pittsburgh, and he makes his way here kind of in a weird role, because the Pirates didn't really know what the catcher position was really, like what direction it was going. The Pirates didn't really know, okay, are we really leaning on Yasmani Grandal to run things, especially with how old he is? Are we really doing that? So they kind of thrust Joey Bart into this starting role, and he just absolutely crushes it and knocks it out of the park. I mean, you look at what he did in April, not much better than Davis at 219 with a 531 slugging, but you start to see that those numbers really pick up. Like, for instance, in May, slash 321, 367, 500. Misses a large chunk of May and June due to injury. Then July, he comes back for full time, slashes 276, 358, 466. So you're starting to get some offensive production here, because even in August, a month where a lot of this Pirates team really struggled mightily, and it was the month that erased them from any chance of being in the postseason, Joey Bart slashes 288, 342, and 534. Ends the season 241, 302, 345 on the slugging number with September. And then just baseline stats on the year. Career high in average, career high in on base, career high in slugging, career high in OPS. So suddenly, the Pittsburgh Pirates started to get offensive production from a position that they have not seen offensive production from in a very long time. I mean, you look at the catchers that have went through Pittsburgh since the last time they really had like a real threat behind the plate offensively, and I would argue that it was either Cervelli or Russell Martin. You're looking at Austin Hedges, you're looking at Jacob Stallings, who are both defensive first catchers, and then, you know, the Jason DeLays of the world and the Andrew Knapps of the world and guys like that. But then Joey Bart comes in, and now going into 2025, folks, and this isn't a spoiler, this isn't me trying to surprise you or say that this is like out of the realm of possibility. Joey Bart will be the starting catcher when 2025 rolls around. No ifs, ands, or buts, because Henry Davis has not done enough for you yet to just hand him that spot. And Joey Bart has shown you over the course of an entire season that he can be a valuable piece offensively behind the backstop. Defense leaves a little bit to be desired, but you still have to walk away from 2024 from Joey Bart and be satisfied. You have to come out of this season and say, that is our starting catcher until otherwise noted. And what this does now for the dynamic of the catching position is force Henry Davis, who, mind you, number 1 overall selection in 2022. It forces him now to have to play himself back into that starting role. He's not just going to get it handed to him. He's not going to just come up through the minors super fast and have it handed to him. He's going to have to play up to par to even stay on the roster. Because there's a world where Henry Davis doesn't even start the season on the MLB roster. There's a world, obviously, where Endy Rodriguez, who again we'll talk about later, doesn't start on the MLB roster. If you had to ask me right now, the Pirates have one MLB catcher on this roster, and it is Joey Bart. Henry Davis just hasn't shown me personally anything yet to give him that distinction. And I know a lot of people this season were, well, Endy would have been nice to have back. Endy Rodriguez hasn't proven anything yet either. He still has a lot to prove, especially coming off of a massive injury. So, do the Pirates potentially go out and get another free agent catcher to be behind Joey Bart just to kind of, have an insurance policy on this so Henry Davis can work out the kinks, can finally take that next step and force himself onto the roster? It's a very big possibility. But as of right now, Joey Bart, unquestioned, is your starting catcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2025. He emerged. He produced offensively. Again, defensively, you'd like to see a little bit more. I would much rather take a guy that's hitting the baseball at a 265 clip with a near 800 OPS over the course of 250 at-bats that struggles a little bit defensively than a guy who hasn't been hitting the ball at all. So, when we talk about Henry Davis, what's up with him? And is 2025 the year where we see Hank take that next step? We'll discuss next on Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com right now for all of your betting needs, because you can start your betting with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. You can bet on the NFL. You can bet on the League Championship Series and baseball's playoffs. Hockey is back. College football is on almost every day. You have everything at your disposal on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So go to FanDuel.com right now or check out the FanDuel Sportsbook app for all of your betting needs this fall. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day. After making this your first listen of the day, even if it is in the late afternoon, make sure you go check out Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. He is covering everything you need to know about baseball's postseason, all of the news in baseball every single day on our flagship show here on Locked On MLB. So when you're talking about the catching position of the Pittsburgh Pirates, you really have to consider that all of this is kind of now centered around what kind of player Henry Davis is going to be as a professional. We saw how good he was at Louisville leading up to that draft and didn't really know if he was going to be an option for the #1 selection in a draft that really didn't have a bona fide #1 pick. Henry Davis became that pick. Accelerates his way to the big leagues very quickly. One of the fastest #1 overall selections to debut as quick as he did. And when you focus on Henry Davis and you look at what we've seen so far from Hank, it just hasn't been good. 329 at-bats. The OPS is a 590. It just hasn't been good. Flat, clear cut to the point. And we've seen glimpses of it. We have. We've seen the power. We've seen the ability to place the ball at all parts of the field. We've seen the ability to showcase the talent that he had in college that made him a #1 overall pick in the first place. What we haven't seen is consistency, outside of him being consistently bad and poor at the plate. But we haven't consistently seen him be a very good player just yet. And a lot of that, I think, boils down to just what you see from Henry Davis as a player, as a person, and what we hear about him. There was a great story by Kevin Gorman in the Trib about 3 weeks ago where you just kind of hear it in Henry Davis's responses that he wants it bad. Every player obviously wants it, but Henry wants it. And he's a guy that's work ethic, from what I've been told and what is reported, is that his work ethic is among the best on the team, the best in the system. But he is also a guy that pushes. He pushes boundaries as far as the development that he needs to have. And you hear him discuss this with Kevin Gorman. That's actually all I have to take it for. Me sitting here and dwelling on anything that happened isn't going to help in the future. I need to take some opportunity to understand what I can learn from this to make myself a better player in person moving forward and take advantage of every opportunity I have to make that happen. Do everything I can to help the plan and make what I know I can and what I have done in the minor leagues come to fruition in the big leagues. And that's really the difference at this point. We've seen Henry Davis be very good in the minor leagues. We've seen him be very good in spring training, like this season. He hit .310 with 4 home runs and 12 RBIs in Bradenton this year. Those were numbers that warranted excitement going into this year. He was actually a large reason why a lot of Pirate fans, including myself, thought that this team had some very high power potential going into the year because of what he was able to do in spring training. But then you look at what he did coming out of it in his first 23 games, he hits 162, gets optioned, shows no signs of life whatsoever. And it sucks. And you want him, again, to be a very good player. You want him to work out. And what we saw this year, too, and something that I would just go out and say now, is that Henry Davis is the best defensive catcher the Pirates have in their system, on their roster right now. And remember, that was the big gripe that everybody had when Henry Davis was coming through the system and going into being a starting catcher, is that the defense wasn't good enough. The defense this, the defense that, this and that. We heard all about the defense. But we never really ever considered the biggest issue that the Pirates have had at the catcher position has not been defense. It's been the willingness to get production offensively out of the position. If you want a defense, you just keep Austin Hedges. You keep Jacob Stallings. But those guys were not giving you anything offensively. And we haven't seen that from Henry Davis either. And it's now to the point in his development where he just has to hit. He has to be able to go up to the plate and hit the baseball consistently at a high clip. Within reason, mind you. But if you look at Henry Davis now, from what we've seen from him throughout his career so far, if he could be a 250 hitter and give the Pirates 12 to 15 home runs a year, and the OPS can be just north of 700, it could literally be 701 for all I care. Then you'll take that. Because at that point, he can at least be serviceable. He can at least be, if he's not the starter, a very quality backup. Or he can emerge and be the starter again, and then you have Joey Bart as a very strong backup option. And this is all before we even consider Endy Rodriguez, who we'll talk about in the final part of the show. But the biggest thing that I think really bugs me about Henry Davis at this point is, again, you look at the numbers that he had in Indianapolis. 307, 401, 555, 13 homers, 43 RBIs in 57 games. That's what I think frustrates you the most, is that the production is there. It just isn't translating to the big league level. He's showing that he has that offensive potential in there in the minor leagues. And you'll probably hear me talk about this a lot because it's starting to become a trend with this organization where a lot of these guys hit really well in the minors and then get here and can't do anything. You'll hear that be talked about all through this player review series. But I want to leave you with this quote from this article from Henry Davis to Kevin Gorman. I always felt in the past when things got later in the count, I try to be short to the ball and consistent and let everything happen and just be a tough out. I do feel like I try to do too much. I tried to be on everything, cover everything, have the one swing that was going to get me out of it rather than trusting the process, which is something I've historically done well. That's approach. It's not a mechanics issue. It's not anything to do with mechanics. I mean, there are some mechanical issues with his swing, but I'm not going to bore you for 10 minutes talking about that. It's the approach. That is what's going to be the difference for Henry Davis moving forward, is the approach that he has at the plate and how he implements everything he's learning. Those are going to be the big differences in what you see from Henry Davis moving forward. And if that pick ends up being a drastic failure, or if it ends up not looking all that bad after all, because at the end of the day, folks, we're not judging Henry Davis on the first 2 years of his career. We're judging him across his entire career. And if he can really turn it around and figure it out, folks, this catcher position gets even better. All of this, leaving out Endy Rodriguez for now. Where does Endy fit in after his massive injury and coming back to the field this year? And what should the plan be for 2025 at the catcher position? Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time Picks allows you to curate and make it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can get all-in pricing that shows you your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. What time is it? It's game time. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. And Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks will keep your lineup live. Prize Picks also puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Also, Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. And folks, thank you so much for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. Thank you to all of my loyal third segment listeners. Thank you to all my everydayers who tune into the show when it comes out all the time. Thank you for all the love you show me as well. After being in Savannah for 9 days and coming back up to some 47-degree weather, get a little stuffy. You know. What's getting a little stuffy, though, is the potential of this catching position. It is a position now that at one point was barren. Nobody really in the system outside of Davis and Rodriguez. Obviously, Endy Rodriguez gets hurt. Henry Davis doesn't show much of anything as of yet. And you really start to wonder what direction this position group was going in. And now you have Joey Bart as the unquestioned guy. You look at what he's been able to offer you and what he's been able to do. But you have Endy Rodriguez as well. What do you do with Endy? Endy, flexible. He could play first base. He could play second. He could play the outfield. And he could play catcher. But much like Henry Davis, and even more so, Endy Rodriguez just hasn't proven anything yet at the MLB level. He hasn't really done much of anything to warrant just being handed a roster spot when 2025 begins. And I would argue that he probably won't have a roster spot when 2025 begins because of what's happened and where he is in his career. So you consider that and you say, okay, Joey Bart is your starter. Henry Davis still has to show us something. So these are the balls that start to roll now. Endy Rodriguez, you don't really know yet because he still has to get fully back to MLB action. And even when he does, it'll be the first time in well over a year that he sees MLB action. So you wonder, okay, what stance do the Pirates take now at the catching position? What do you do with a guy like Jason DeLay? Do you go out and do you go get a free agent catcher, as I mentioned earlier, as an insurance policy for what you may need if Henry Davis and Endy Rodriguez don't pan out in 25, which then you're starting to really have some concerns. These are all the things that you got to think about. But just be happy that Joey Bart is here, because if he wasn't, you're looking at Henry Davis being the starting catcher immediately. You're definitely having to look at getting a free agent catcher or trading for a catcher. And that position, I just don't think you feel as good about the catching position without Joey Bart a part of it. That's a massive deal. That's a big deal. Because then you wonder, okay, so we at least have a guy that we can depend on going into the year, but we could add 3 that we could depend on, depending on how Henry Davis develops, how Endy Rodriguez develops. But in the meantime, we could also go get an insurance policy, a guy to just be the backup to Joey Bart before that happens. It's in a good place. I think the catching position right now is in a better place leaving this season and going into the next than it has been in a while. Because I know that 2023 going into 2024, it was a unit that had a lot of promise because we were expecting Henry Davis to take that next step. Endy Rodriguez gets hurt, then you start to worry because then a lot of the onus was getting put on Henry Davis. Now, it's not. He can develop, and he's going to have to work his way here to really solidify himself on this roster. You couldn't have said that last year. You couldn't have said that the year before that with what was here. Now you can. Endy Rodriguez, you let him keep getting back to his normal form. You bring him up. You see what he can do. But there's no guarantee that Endy Rodriguez is even a catcher anymore because of what the Pirates currently have right now and what they could add to throughout the offseason. Folks, thank you so much for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. Find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. You can find the show on YouTube and all of your main podcast platforms. It's free and available to you every Monday through Friday until otherwise noted this offseason, where it'll be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And folks, all I could say is thank you for tuning in as you always do. Please like, review, subscribe, leave a comment, share your thoughts. It could be anything. And with that said, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday evening. We'll see you tomorrow. But until then, see you on the flip side.